Hello and welcome to Rambling Reviews. We are doing Infinity Train Book 2, and we are up to episode 6? I think 6? The Lucky Cat Car. And, at this point, do I need to say it was a good episode? I feel like I don't, really. But I'm gonna. It's a good episode. And I'll and I'll say this right up front. The cat's back. I'm very excited about it. The cat and Randall. Like it was like they heard my my cries for the cat and Randall and said, "Hey, don't worry, we got you." And they slipped them both into the episode. Admittedly, minor roles. Best I think I could hope for in these circumstances. It did make me wonder though. Like, is there an issue here? Is there a reason I feel that way about these things? Because I keep wondering, like, if there were new characters that were as, like, that I felt that way about, then I don't think I'd mind so much we weren't seeing them. And I just don't feel like I keep thinking, oh, maybe the new characters aren't quite, living up to the original set. Maybe that's the problem. I can't decide if that's true or not, though, because I love Alan Dracula and I really like Jesse, and obviously MT's from the first series anyway. So I don't know. Maybe it's more maybe about the incidental characters. The not incidental, but sort of the other people that make up the sort of single stories. Then again, I really like the Toad. I'd be really thrilled to see the Toad again next season. So maybe I'm just talking on my backside. It's hard to say. It's sometimes when you do these sort of review things, it's really weird because I've not they are good. I do call it rambling review, but review is a strong word. I feel like it's just literally I finish watching the episode the second time, and I hit record and I just sort of talk about it. Like, and that can sometimes be like my thoughts. Sometimes they go to what was most interesting about it. Sometimes they go to what I didn't like about it, what didn't work, just whatever I'm interested in sort of talking about in the immediate aftermath. But yeah, I mean, let's not look at the negative. Let's look at the positive. The cat was back. Like, what that says about the characters in this season, I'm not sure. I feel maybe it's all in my head. There's a chance because I do when I actually sit down and think about the characters in this season. There's plenty I love. So maybe we'll see how I feel next season about these characters. Maybe it's just that I haven't had to spend as much time with them yet. But yeah, a ton of stuff in this episode to talk about. So let's get going. This is the one, of course, where they got the Lucky Cat car, which does have a giant Lucky Cat in it. And inside that is a fair run by the cat, where once a month, the first person to reach 1,000 points on the games in the fair gets the door out of the carriage. There's a masked person on the train who is trying to do it. Tulip and Jesse end up trying to compete against that person. That person ends up winning because they end up having to go back for Alan Dracula, who's got a funny little side plot in this episode. But when that person wins, they don't want to use the door to get out. They actually open the door and let a bunch of like kids in who trash the place. And in all that chaos, they let Tulip and Jesse come with them. And the implication being there's some sort of anti-get your number down group that would exist within the train. I wrote down what they called themselves. They called themselves Apex, I think. Someone said Apex, and I assumed it was their name. If that's wrong, I'm going to look so stupid. Like, I just heard the word Apex. But the word Apex doesn't just slip into casual conversation. It must be their name. That must be the name of their group. I've not written that down for no reason. Unless I have. These notes are always so chaotic to sift through. Anyway, so before we get to all that and break all that down, because that's where the episode ends, let's take a look at the episode from the other end. So, love the premise. I think it's a great way to bring the cat back into it because there's this undertone of this is kind of what she's up to at the moment, and it's like she's sort of gaining in two ways. All the denizens of the train are coming to spend money and use play these games, but she's also turning when passengers come through into a game that she's having the various people who live on the train bet on, which leads to a couple of good jokes, but is also very the cat. It's like she's always it's so perfect because it's so on the line, which is what everything she does is, because she's so very much a like an almost like an anti-hero, because she is ultimately always going to put herself first as much as she can, and that's been consistent. So here she is mildly helping the people traveling on the train, but like with this idea of only one E is going to come through, I'm going to make a ton of money off it. So it's like she's helping, but she's not. She's helping, but she's helping herself at the same time, and that is very, very the cat, and also she bends the rules a little bit here to help out Jessie and Mira Tulip, who she does recognize. There's a really cool moment where she thinks she's Tulip, and then goes, "Oh, wait a minute, no," and then they put it together. That's really cool. Just a great use of her character. It doesn't look like she's going to be coming back after this one. And they kind of make it seem like, she lives in this car now. She runs this car. They've gone on. That's the last we'll see of the cat. Randall also shows up. What's really interesting about the Randall showing up is we know that Tulip and Jessie have already been to the beachside car where they've met Randall. Jessie took a picture of them with Randall holding up his donut hole or whatever. And yet, in this one, MT refers to him as water guy or something like that, and he does once again try to sell them the donut hole. I just love. I wrote down the exact quote, which is from his. So it's like one of those carnival games where you squirt water into like a balloon, like a nozzle that's attached to a balloon, and if you fill up the balloon and make it pop, you win with the amount of water you've got. So you've got to have good aim. But the water is more another Randall. So inside the balloon, you can see a Randall face, and then the main Randall that's running the stand is like, "Whoa, speaking of commerce, can I interest you in a donut holder?" And he tries to sell it to them, and they're not interested. They run away, and as he leaves, the Randall in the balloon is like, "Came on a bit strong there, mate. To be honest," and it's just, I don't know, it's just classic Randall stuff. I love it. Randall remains one of my favorite characters in the show, and. Rhys Darby does such a good job voicing him, and again, I mean, Kate Mulgrew, Captain Janeway, does a great job. I'm gonna double check that Kate Mulgrew, does a great job as the cat here. You could argue the cat's slightly softened, I think, from the previous season, maybe her experience with Tulip, because I feel like early season 1 cat, when she meets Tulip in the beachside car, I don't feel like she would have given as much leeway to passengers as she's done here. So I do think she's been changed by her experience with Tulip. But yeah, I think that's like I think the way they've done it, it's been very natural. So I think what I'm enjoying about it is there's no, like, because she's only showing up every now and then, it's way more believable that her character is sort of growing off screen, and not just believable, but like fine. Like, it doesn't bother you that you missed the growth. You're satisfied with seeing it because you've not seen her in a while anyway. So whereas I think when I talked about, I think last week, the Jessie and Tulip's relationship took a step forward in the gap between the episodes, depending on your interpretation of the hug at the end of the previous episode, which to me wasn't maybe a strong enough way to, clarify that. I think I would have liked to have seen a moment where they sort of maybe discussed it, or it came up a bit more naturally within the context of a plot, but that felt like an omission. Whereas with the cat, obviously you get away with it because she's been off screen for such a long time, and we saw in the gaps every time between her appearances in the first season, she shifted as well. So it really does track with that. Like, if you were to draw it on a graph, you could very cohesively fill in the gaps, because it's a very sort of functional trend that works exactly right within her character's sort of growth. Like, it's exactly in that same direction constantly, and at the sort of the same rate. So she's still got her conniving, con artisty ways about her. She's still looking after number one, but she's certainly a little bit more open to helping out the other characters in this, which I really liked. This episode has a ton of other stuff in it that we need to talk about. So first of all, we do answer that question of when they're in a house of mirrors and there's multiple Tulip reflections. Are they all different reflections? no, they're all her also, which suggests that if she sees her own reflection, herself reflected back in something that's also her. They then go on to make a joke about, like, how does that even physically work? And she's like, I don't know. Do you know how your body works? To Jesse. So, like, they're kind of doing it in that, like, that's just the physics of a reflection. How that works exactly, it's beyond your understanding. It's beyond human understanding, so it doesn't really matter. And that sort of puts to bed a lot of the questions I had that I was wondering if they'd get to or not. I'm okay with it. I don't really need the lore going into too much detail, because I feel like they're in a really like very precarious position there, because they've set up this world that I'm not sure they were in necessarily when they first came up with the idea of a reflection, being its own being, that they were ever really expecting to explore necessarily in this depth. I don't necessarily think they knew when they introduced Miratil that she'd be the protagonist of a book too, because I feel like you might have come up with like, I think you're very much going to ignore that world, because I'm not sure if you're ever going to actually trying to make that world make complete sense that it's going to work. So they have to be vague about it, because more and more though, I'm wondering, so they have a moment in this episode on the subject of Miratil, I'm wondering about the end game with this and where this is going for these two characters and where they're going to be, in the end. Jesse sort of in this one is like, well, you're going to come with me. I'm not going to leave you on this car being chased all the time by the police. You can come through my portal. And I was just like, I don't think that's going to work. Like, she's not going to... I don't think she's going to be able to go through that portal at all. I think he's going to step through, she's going to follow, and, like, it's not going to work. She's either going to still be on the train... She's going to be... There is an episode coming up called... There's an episode coming up called The Wasteland. And I've got a theory. So, it's possible. So, the next episode is called The Mall Car. Then it's The Wasteland. And then there's the final two. I have a feeling that The Mall Car could potentially end with Jesse's portal. And because if my memory serves, the visual of the portal is it's in the car, but it goes out over the wasteland and then up into the sky. Jesse steps through, and you get that visual of his body being pulled through the portal, and then sort of not disintegrating, but like almost like being pulled apart and then reassembled on the other side. I feel like Miratil's going to step in. She is going to get pulled out, but it's not. They can't break her body up the way it breaks up a human's, and she's just going to fall straight into the wasteland. And it's. Well, that's why I think there's an episode called The Wasteland. It's the only episode I can see that doesn't have car in the title as well. So that's... Oh no, the engine, the season 1 finale didn't have the word car in the title either. But yeah, I have a feeling that's where we're at. And especially because Jesse's number comes down to like 4 this week. I think if Jesse's number had been higher at the end of this episode, that theory wouldn't have occurred to me. But when I glanced at the episode titles, I was like, okay, I think I see where this is going. Especially when you glance at the episode title, it's a combination of information, isn't it? It's Jesse's number going down so low. It's this reference that he's going to bring her with him. The fact that I just don't think that's going to be feasible or work. I think the only way she gets into the prime world is if she becomes his reflection or becomes someone else's reflection or goes back to being Tulip's reflection. I don't see her being able to get to the prime world any other way. Certainly not through one of those portals. So when you combine that with his number being so low, that title, Wasteland, it all just sort of like culminates in sort of what I think is, I'm more confident than I normally am about that being the way it's going. With his number being 4, I tell you, we'll come back to it a little bit later actually, but there is a potential counter to that. But that's where I'm leaning right now and where I think it's all going. It's a lovely idea, though, that Jesse wants to bring her with him. And the way he does it is when he suggests it, his number goes down. And I want to talk about his number going down, because I've been thinking about it a lot. Because in the last episode, I sort of talked about how nebulous it was. And I was sort of getting a little frustrated, because it just felt like with Tulip, it was always at least mildly. You could always, even though you couldn't exactly explain it, I did feel like there was always, her behavior in the episode was always under the theme of the lesson she was trying to learn. And I think maybe the problem here is that I've kind of misunderstood Jesse's lesson a little bit. Maybe it's not about sometimes looking after yourself. Maybe it's about looking after people when you've not got yourself in mind. So, like, doing the right thing regardless of how it affects you. So with his brother, the right thing would have been to tell those guys to shove off, but he lost his friends. So it's, yes, part of his people pleaser thing, but it manifests in a different way. So I think the reason his number went down last week was because he helped. He helped someone else, not for necessarily his own gain. And this week, I feel like it's the same thing. He offers to help Tulip. His number goes straight down. So I think that's because he's helping her with no real. It doesn't help. It doesn't assist. It doesn't do anything for him. It makes no difference to him, really. So I think that's what they're getting at there, which sort of recontextualizes last week's one when I said the number went down, and I kind of was a little bit confused as to why. So yeah, I think it's a little more complicated than just when he does stuff for himself and when he doesn't. And that's good. I think that sort of complexity what makes this show great. And the more I think about it, the more that makes sense. This episode's full of a ton of references to other episodes from season 1. I mean, where do I even start? Let's see. Sorry, before I get to that very quickly, there's another reference to Nate. Jesse's kind of sad when Nate gets brought up, and she says, it's okay, you'll make things right with him when you get home. Just a nice little reminder of what Jesse's sort of here for, and that he's still struggling with his choices before he got on the train. It doesn't need to be the center of it, because again, I feel like MT is kind of the focus of this season. Well, they're actually kind of pulling focus a little bit. It's like, it does feel like, and this isn't a criticism, this is just an observation of the structure, it feels like Tulip got this huge in-depth story about her because she got to be the focus of her season, whereas here I feel like because we're splitting duty between Jesse and MT, neither of them are getting as complex a story or as deep a story maybe as Tulip got at present. That does not mean to say they're not going to get there, so we'll see, but that is a consequence of that choice, and I'm glad about that choice because I think it's made the season way more interesting. So I don't mind that trade-off, but it's an interesting thing that I've observed is sort of happening, is that sort of split is leading to both stories having to be a little bit thinner, and maybe not quite as in-depth as Tulip's was. But yeah, sorry, to all the references, man, right, so Nancy, still making pasta from the Straight Up Italy car from season 1. Khaki Bottoms is holding the Jiggle Wiggle. For those who don't remember, Khaki Bottoms is from the Ball Pit car, so he did survive, and he's now missing an ear, but it's like been patched up. Adorable. I think right. So I actually had to look this guy up because I recognized it. Was like, oh, it's the guy from the Crystal car, and he's in this episode playing Dance Dance Revolution. I had to go to the Infinity Train wiki and look up the episode for the Crystal car. Obviously being careful not to get any other information, because I had to find out. I was like, what is that guy's name? And it says it's Greige or Greige, which is like grey and beige. Does that get said in the episode, or have the audience made that up? I don't know where that name comes from. It doesn't sound familiar to me. But anyway, he's in this episode in the car playing Dance Dance Revolution, which I thought was adorable. We have plushies of the wizards from the Tiny Wizard car. Then the Tiny Wizards themselves show up a little bit later. We also have some cross-eyed ducks, plushie versions of them on the prize wall. Where else are we? The turtle people from the Unfinished car. There's a glimpse when the cat makes her radio announcement, or like whatever Tannoy announcement of the back of a turtle person from the Unfinished car, and Corgi from the Corgi car, which I thought was really neat. Who else? What else? I did think this episode was going to have one other huge tie to the first season, and I was proven wrong about it. The entire episode, I thought the masked person was going to turn out to be Amelia. I was absolutely convinced. I was actually ready to complain on here that they made it too obvious it was Amelia, because there's no one else that's on the train that would be a surprise to put in a mask. But it turns out there's this Grace person who we'll talk about in a minute, but utterly convinced it was going to turn out to be Amelia working on getting her number down and moving through the car normally. There are other links, I think, to Amelia at the end of this episode, but again, we'll get to those a little bit later. I think that having the door as a prize, if I haven't really mentioned it, was a really clever idea. Really good way to get, to incorporate this neat, it's a way to incorporate this neat concept of a games car, like an arcadey, almost like fairground games car with, with the traditional concept of going into a car and having to accomplish something to exit. It's a really neat sort of combination of the two. It fits really well. Like it. Very good writing. Terrence is back as another thing, but he's now being kicked on his own terms. He set up a booth where you can kick him at like a target or targets to win prizes. It's okay now because now it's on his terms, which I think is really neat. And obviously, they say it's a really good joke because they say what I was thinking. They're like, "Oh, he has a name now. Like, did you have that name the first time we met you?" He's like, "Nope." That's just really awkward. So yeah, his name is Terrence, and now we've learnt it. Other little details I noticed before I get into sort of like just discussing this ending, which I really want to talk about. Alan Dracula randomly turns at one point into a pickle jar, labeled Alan Dracula Pickles, which proves he's accepted that as his name. There's also this amazing running joke where he keeps trying to get to like a claw machine, and the prizes are on sort of like looks like fake grass, but I guess it's real grass. The whole episode he's trying to eat it. He's desperately trying to eat it, and they keep pulling him away, and eventually he's missing. And where they find him is timing. Timing is the best on that. All right, I'm back. Literally a door-to-door salesman trying to shill broadband. The worst, like, timing. Oh, absolutely awful timing. Right, so I have no idea what I was talking about. Alan Dracula, maybe? Grass? Oh yeah, he goes tiny and he goes in there and eats the grass. So it turns out it's probably real grass. I've really lost the flow of what I was talking about. But yeah, I love that. I love anything to do with Alan Dracula in this episode. Very funny. Again, still have no idea what the intention behind that character is. Fun or the solution to everything? I have no idea. The big old mystery that he is. I do like that further in we get the tiny wizards do come back more directly. They're actually running one of the booths, one where you shoot lasers at stuff perfectly. That's the perfect thing they should be doing. One of the games they're playing in this episode is one where they play someone running from the sort of black sort of cockroach monster things from the first series. Thought that was pretty cool. Yeah, so ton of really good like details in this episode. I do also love the jokes that the cat does about like this debtor's prison booth for anyone who's lost the bet about who would win the door first. I thought that was pretty funny. Right, I think that covers all the details. Yeah, I think so. We'll get to the juicy stuff now then. So this is the ending of the episode, which is I think. Yeah, I'm trying to think. This is the first one that's had a cliffhanger that's gone into the next day. So the black market car led into the family tree car. The map car led into the toad car. Then the parasite car didn't have anything, and then the lucky cat cars ended on a cliffhanger that presumably leads us into the mall car, because presumably we're going to pick up right where we've left off here. So let's break it down, because dear lord, like, there's a lot going on. So it turns out the person in the mask, who I was convinced was Amelia, turns out to be someone called Grace. She seems to be the leader of some group. They've got these wavy lines drawn across their face. I don't think that's a coincidence at all. They seem to be under the impression that it's better to have your number higher, which I thought was interesting. I don't know. I'm conflicted on these guys because there's two. No, they're not that dissimilar. They're basically either people who, quite frankly, know that going down to zero will get you off the train, but they're not interested. They like being on the train. They don't want to be removed. Or they're sort of Amelia fanatics. People are like sort of following in her path, because at the end of last time we saw her, she'd been the conductor. She got sort of chucked out of being that, but she had these numbers covering her body, and Grace in this does two things to indicate that like a higher number is something she's after for whatever reason. One is that she says to Jesse when she sees his number is 4, she says we'll have to fix that back at base. So fix that meaning that's far too low. Let's gotta get that up. And then we see when she takes her glove off, her numbers are down her arm. So from my perspective, the two explanations for that is they are either just quite simply not wanting to leave the train, they're having too much fun, so they're just making the number go up to keep them there as long as possible. Absolutely possible. But I don't think it's a coincidence the line thing they've got drawn over their face. So I think it's more likely that there's some sort of Amelia cult. Like, I don't know. I feel like if she was running it directly, that would be backwards for her character, I think. I like to think her character then went on to start bringing her number down in the original series. I would struggle to think that she did anything but that. It's possible, though. I think what's more likely is they're inspired by her, like they've heard of her, they maybe even met her, or maybe they thought, maybe they, like, remember the train under her conductorship and had bumped into her as the conductor, because that symbol across the face, I suppose, isn't really a symbol of Amelia. Actually, thinking back, that's what she looked like when she was in her full conductor outfit. So yeah, maybe it's that can't be a coincidence. I'm now wondering if it's actually more of an anti. It could also... So, yeah, okay, so there's two... Okay, we'll go back to we'll reset. It's either they want to stay because they want to stay, and they don't want to leave, so they want the number to go up, or forget anything I've said about Amelia. I think it's more likely to be related to Amelia as the conductor, and that 1-1's taken over now, and he's telling people, work your number down, but they probably wouldn't have had that message if they were from Amelia's time. So they've drawn the symbol of the old conductor over their faces, and they're working against 1-1. That seems... No, I think it's got to be the first one. No, it can't be, though, because it can't be a coincidence that they've got that symbol drawn on their face. It really can't be, because it's too specific. It's too much the iconography of the old conductor. If that's true, that's a hell of a story. It does make sense. There's a reason my brain's sort of like firing in that direction, is because it fits. It fits a bit too well. Yeah, I think if I'm guessing, but if that's the case, oh yeah, I should clarify this as well. So my other theory earlier was that, I mentioned about like Jesse being able to get to his door pretty soon, right? Like within the next episode or so. At the end of the next one or start of the one after, to have the whole setup for Tulip of the Wasteland, right? Mirror Tulip, sorry, MT in the Wasteland. But the other option, when I said, there's another possibility, we'll come to that, is that they do, because I did note how close Jesse was plummeting to his zero for his door. The other option is that this group successfully convinced Jesse to go along with what they're doing, and his number goes back up massively. And then the challenge of the last 3 episodes is going to be getting it back down, and convincing Jesse this. I feel like there's a chance they could tempt Jesse to their side of things, and he could have like not a relapse as such, but could swing the other way. I don't know which way that is. See, again, there's so many different versions of this now that I've got theories upon my theories. So I've got 2 different. See, this is how you do it, guys. You want to sound like a genius. What you do is you make multiple theories up. People will only remember the ones that turn out to be right. So I've got Jesse's number going back up, or I've got Jesse's number going down so low he's got a portal. And I've got this group either being a bit more frivolous and being just like, hey, we want to stay here, or I've got them being some sort of weird, like, cult of the old conductor. Because that still makes a lot of sense. I'm leaning towards that. It just makes too much sense. Because if they were from Amelia's time, you didn't get a video. But I wonder if they've seen that since. No, that seems unlikely, actually. Then how would they know there's a new conductor to rebel without Amelia's direct intervention? No, It could be any of these things. I'm talking myself in circles here. I have no idea. Is ultimately what I'm getting at, but that does really fit in my head as a potential idea for where this could go. And I do think there's a possibility we're going to see Jesse's number go back the other way. So yeah, roll on the next episode, right? Like it's awesome. It's such a good show, and this is a great episode, and there's a lot to think about. It's still honoring all the old stuff really thoroughly. I actually kind of like that they contained a lot of the references to the previous season in this one episode. I feel like it makes the other episodes feel like they're part of their own unique season. This week they had a harder time convincing me there weren't that many reflective surfaces about. Like, so in all the other episodes, they keep putting them in very sort of rustic cars. You know, right from the family tree car through to, like, I'm trying to think where else have they been. The map car, which is all very sort of like trees and stuff. The toad car, which is just empty. The runway fairway and the parasite car. These have all been very rustic. And even when they first go into the Lucky Cat car, it's just a big field. And that is obviously because otherwise you'd be constantly going, why aren't the mirror police finding mirror chip? Why aren't the mirror police finding mirror chip? And at a certain point, it starts to look like design rather than coincidence. Like the first couple of times you go, that's lucky. And then you start going, oh, well, this is the hand of the writer coercing this to be this way, because otherwise you ask too many questions. But then she gets into the I guess they kind of make it like an old school fair where everything's made out of wood and stuff. I still find it hard to believe that all these objects around, that she wouldn't have, you know, come across reflective surfaces. But it does seem that Mirror Tulip and Jessie are ending up in more cars with a sort of nature-y aesthetic or an outdoorsy aesthetic than Tulip did. I mean, I suppose the cars can move around and reshuffle. Maybe one's like up the front of the car, just like organizing it that way on purpose to help her out. I don't know. That'd be interesting, I suppose. That he's been keeping an eye on her and her progress. I don't know what he would do. I'm starting to grow questions as well about, like, who made this? Like, this is designed by a person, clearly. Like, they made a robot conductor, like, with that job in mind. So, yeah, I've been wondering about that. I wonder if they'll ever get to that. I don't know. Who knows? But I'm thoroughly enjoying the journey this time. It does just keep getting better and better on the whole, like with the exception of sort of like maybe Parasite car is not quite as good as Toy Car. This Lucky Cat car is another big step up. Even though I would always love more of these characters like Cat and Randall, if they don't show up again this season, totally understand. We got an episode where a bunch of references to the old season were all contained. There was one big nostalgia trip for book one, and now we just keep focusing on the new characters, which is the right thing to do. I understand that. There's just that, you have to understand, there's that part of me that loved that first season, just aching to see more of where those people are. But like my little glimpse of Khaki Bottoms missing his ear this week was like enough to keep me content. And then maybe they do an episode like this again next year and they can mix it up with references to both book 1 and 2. You know, we see Terrence the Toad again, who just remains just one of my favourite sources of comedy this season. Like that pause in this episode when they're like, Terrence, was that your name when we last met you? He's, nope. It's just such a good, like, awkward pause. Absolutely love it. So yeah, very excited. The mall car. My assumption is the mall car is the base for these are like teenagers. Actually, if it is, okay, so the theory that I have is it's a group of like younger passengers on the train, based on what we've seen here, that are rebelling against the train for whatever reason, whether I'm right or wrong about the conductor stuff. Although again, I feel like that drawing of the faces too overt to ignore. But if we pretend that's not a thing, and we just go, they're a gang of like youths or whatever. The next episode's called The Mall Car, and they're heading to their base. My assumption is it's a mall that they've like trashed and are hanging out in, and it's all very, I don't know, like the kids in the kids from Hook, like they're just like the Neverland, like it's covered in spray paint and it stinks. So they all the windows are smashed and graffiti everywhere, and they're running rampant, that sort of thing. Skateboarding, because sure, you know what I mean, like the sort of stuff that these sort of TV shows do, is like teenagers going wild, and I feel like what's interesting about that is, if that is the case, I find it hard to believe they're not going to come across a reflective surface there. So that's going to be interesting for MT, for sure. But yeah, I feel like it's going to turn out to be their base, pretty clearly, I feel. So lots of different stuff to unpack, but as always, I'm enjoying very much so. Can't wait to see more. Hope you're on the journey with me. As I've mentioned in previous episodes, if you are watching along with me, head over to HBO Max and watch it there, because that would help eyeballs on the show through that means, apparently is important at this stage, according to the creator Owen Dennis. So please do that, and otherwise I'll see you guys in the next one, 2 days time, as we discuss this episode might be the episode that's airing on a Sunday. If this has come out on a Sunday or late night on a Saturday, then it's going to be 3 days till you see me, because I can't release this on a Tuesday alongside our Rewind reviews. But I'll see you then. So depending on when this came out, it'll either be 2 or 3 days from now when I see you next, as we discuss the mall car.